views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Phi Labs or the Archway Protocol. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Archway podcast. I'm your host, Valeria Salazar, joined by co-host Max McKendry.
Hey.
Let's get started. So up first on proposals, we have an update on a few that we touched on last week. So we mentioned the proposal 101 on the Cosmos Hub to support victims of Turkey. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be passing at the moment.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about why that might be. A lot of it, I think, has to do with just the precedent it sets when you start to use protocol funds to fund like a humanitarian issue. Although, like we've reiterated a few times, we think it's a great gesture and we understand people need help. So we definitely support any sort of assistance given. But also, I can understand why there might be some questionable or people questioning whether or not it makes sense to give to, for example, just Turkey, when we discussed how Syria had some issues as well, and just what that means going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very happy to see that proposal 103 on the Cosmos Hub, the Confio proposal, is basically as good as passed. For those of you that do not remember, this is the proposal to fund about, I think it was 2 years of Confio's development. So yeah, I'm really happy to see that.
Yeah, I think it was 1.25 million is the first tranche, and that's, I believe, what's in that prop, with the understanding that they'll likely be coming back for a second prop in the future that will be for another 1.25 million USD, and that's to basically help fund their operations and maintenance on a lot of the things on the hub going forward, which kind of leads us into this next discussion topic, which is Prop 104, and that is a prop to have notional help fund the hub. I think right now it's currently not at quorum, so we're not sure where it's going to go, but I would imagine it'll likely pass. I think notionals provide a lot to the Cosmos Hub, really since it started. So I think the community understands that.
Yeah, absolutely. And currently they're looking to cover 3 years of operations, and they're requesting 40K ATOM per year. So it seems to be like a decently modest proposal for all the work that they do for the Cosmos Hub. So I really hope to see that pass. And at the moment, I believe most votes are for funding this proposal. But yeah, again, because quorum hasn't been reached, it's still up in the air.
Yeah. And I mean, and to be honest, like we talked about it does seem reasonable. And they basically said they'd provide 24/7 maintenance on the hub. And for something like a blockchain that's constantly running and needs to be operating at all times, especially once consumer chains join through ICS, it's going to be increasingly important that you have a dedicated group of contributors who are there to really make sure that nothing goes wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And another proposal, actually from Notional as well, is Proposal 99 to censor validators that are using Allnodes' white label validator service. So essentially, it seems that Allnodes may have compromised the security of several seed phrases of certain validators. So that seems to be a very controversial proposal and a controversial topic in the Cosmos.
Yeah, and so high level, just so people understand, like, the reason they have an issue with this isn't so much that they're going through a third party to get their node infrastructure. It's more related to the fact that when they spin up a node at Allnodes, they actually are the ones who create the key. So although they say that they destroyed the keys when they basically hand them over to the operator who's going to be taking on that node, there's no way to fully know that key has been destroyed. So there's always this potential vector that the node's keys are compromised. So although I don't think Allnodes has any ill will or has really done anything malicious, just having this risk vector there is enough to cause concern, especially because at one point, I believe on Terra, they actually had about, I think it was over 50% of the chain was controlled by Allnodes powered validators. So even though they're different people, that just shows that they had the ability to actually stop or halt the chain potentially, if they did decide to take advantage of this fact, or if they did have the keys stored somewhere. So again, it's not that it happened or that they even had the intent to do anything wrong. It's just that this vector exists. So I just want to make that clear that Allnodes, to my knowledge, hasn't done anything malicious. It's just not a good security practice.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the premise of this blockchain industry in general is you learn by trial, not so much by theorizing all these things before, because this is technology that maybe, 5, 10 years ago didn't really exist. So I think that's just part of it, not necessarily them bearing ill will, but just like the possibility of that being able to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just having that risk exist is too much for some people, and so therefore you have people like Notional who just say, hey, let's avoid this types of risk going forward by not allowing it.
Yeah, the Rangers of the Cosmos.
Yeah.
Yeah. Up next, we have Evmos. So Prop 118 on Evmos has passed, and now Evmos is live on Stride for liquid staking. So, yeah.
We talked about this a little bit. I think last week we mentioned that Evmos and Stride had announced a partnership. So as we mentioned, here it is. And I think we also mentioned that there was another staking service who was looking to create an Evmos derivative. It's looking less likely like that will happen now, especially with Stride and Evmos officially kind of making this partnership and now having a staking derivative available.
Yeah, definitely. Last but not least, on the proposals front, it looks like there's been a flurry of spam proposals all over the cosmos. So there were a bunch of airdrop spam proposals on Gravity Bridge and Secret and different chains like that. So what is up with that?
It seems like someone found a loophole that must have been working, or maybe they're just really tried and true and think that if they keep going, it will work itself out. But yeah, they keep putting up spam proposals, I think, to trick people into either giving up sensitive information or potentially connecting to a malicious contract. I haven't really done a lot of research into what actually happens after you click on those links because I've seen them and pretty quickly identified them as spam. But yeah, they're relentless. So.
Yeah, Jesus, not great.
No.
But yeah, I mean, this is why you need a minimum proposal spend, right? This is why.
Right. This is why you have these safety measures in place to avoid this type of I guess it's just really, it's annoying if anything, because now you have to warn users, but then also just as someone who's involved day to day with governance, you have to kind of just scroll through a bunch of spam just to even find what the real discussions are. So never a good thing.
Yeah, and never a dull moment in
Yeah.
Cosmos. So, speaking of the wider cosmos, there has been a case made against composable finance. So the CTO, among other people, is just one of many that have resigned from composable finance recently due to the history of BrainJar, which is the founder of composable finance.
From what we know, it sounds like he's been involved in a few different protocols in the past, including in one where he received a charge from the SEC. I believe that was in 2019. So he goes by BrainJar. I believe his name is Omar, and he's been basically involved now in a few different teams or projects that have had hacks occur. So there seems to be some sort of pattern of teams or projects that he works for, followed by a hack. And given the fact that he's kind of remained anon for most of it and kind of in the dark for most of the projects that he's leading, there's always some certain red flags that come up. And then once you find out some past information, it really starts to show, the possibility of some wrongdoing happening. And then the final step is seeing employees start to leave. So I'd say at this point, it's gotten pretty concerning.
Yeah, there were also some issues with some audits for a previous protocol he worked on or was involved in early on that it seemed like those audits were never really put through. Again, the fraud charge from the SEC in 2019, it's not looking great.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So I guess if we want to move on to something a little lighter, but still, I would say an issue is that the Cosmos Hub did the row upgrade, and it did not go as smoothly as most people would have anticipated. It seems like a lot of the validators were not prepared for the upgrade, which led to a pretty large delay in the time it took to actually get the chain back to consensus and producing blocks.
Thankfully, however, they've been able to push the row upgrade through, and now that is live on the Cosmos Hub. But it was unfortunate to see, just 50 validators experience failure to update their version. So I really wonder what the coordination issue was there.
And that's one thing that I kind of wonder as well, because the hub being as mature of a protocol as it is, you would think that the validators would be pretty experienced in the upgrades that they've done in the past. So I'm kind of interested as well to know what really caused this delay this time around, but it shows the importance of having one great coordination amongst your validator set, but then also having validators who are very active and responsive. That's something that I think if you're going to be delegating as like a foundation or a protocol to validators, you want to make sure that they're quality, they're responsive, and that they're ready for upgrades. Because quite honestly, anytime the chain's not producing blocks, that's a problem. So you want to be, anytime you have to do a restart or an update, it's important that you have everyone coordinated to make that as painless as possible so that you can get back to what the blockchain is supposed to be doing, which is producing blocks. So
yeah, absolutely. On another note, Cerberus chain will be shut down officially on March 6th. So this is due to the fact that their founder recently disappeared, and he owned 41% of the supply. So yeah, we're losing Cerberus in the cosmos.
yeah, I laugh, but I hope it's not serious when they say he's disappeared. If he disappeared for any reason that's other than he's potentially rugging, then I apologize. But it's definitely an odd look, right? It was a meme chain to start, and it definitely had a decent initial response. People liked the idea of the dog meme chain similar to Wawa, but it never really caught on post that initial wave. So I'm not surprised to see it finally shutting down. I guess I'm just surprised for the reasoning.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving on to more positive news. So Leap's key management repo is now open source for transparency. So congratulations to Leap Wallet. And Osmosis has released their latest round of grant funding. So they've released 6 grants. Among these is Notional, Nabla, and Serotonin will be receiving grants.
And it's cool to see that the committee that they assigned for this is actually handing out grants and doing a good job of funding teams who are trying to build. One thing I think that I was concerned about was that they'd be reluctant to actually allow people to get grants, especially in a time like right now where the market's, on the lower end of the bear market and there's not a lot of capital available. But they're basically picking their bets now and investing in people who are building. And that's something I love to see, especially in the Cosmos.
Yeah, definitely. So an update on ICS. So Informal Systems has published a few changes and updates to ICS. So they've essentially let us know that a consumer chain won't halt if the hub halts and vice versa. And a consumer chain won't halt if another consumer chain halts. However, consumer chains can decide to halt if the hub halts. So they've also defined parameters for slashing validators. And there's a couple quick summaries that you can find that we'll link below.
Yeah, and it's nice to get a little bit more detail on how these consumer chains will operate, including like slashing conditions and what will happen when the hub goes down. I know that was my initial question right when I learned about ICS. Well, then are you completely relying on the hub then? And if that goes down, are you now unable to run your chain? It sounds like that's not the case. I still have to better understand why that is. It sounds like it's because they have their own independent validator set. But again, I guess for me, it's just hard to understand what the incentives are for these hub chains to want to incentivize an ICS chain, given the cost, if it's not going to be producing significant return for them, since they're already taking a risk by validating the hub. But to the same point, a lot of chains need a place to start. And I think ICS provides at least one avenue for that. So I think there'll be interest and demand for it. It's just going to be how sustainable is it? And how much appetite will there be from the validators on the hub to want to support certain ICS chains?
Yeah, so this will be enabled basically because validators will be running a different binary for each chain. So they can independently halt and not halt without affecting each other. But you can create a dependency if you want to make sure that your chain halts the moment the hub halts. And I think it'll be great for projects that really do need that economic security from the get-go. So if you're running, let's say, like a DEX or something that requires users to put a large amount of money and trust the protocol, you want to make sure that you have that bootstrapped validator set from as early as possible. So I think there will be great use cases for this, and I hope to see good projects coming on there soon.
And anytime you can give autonomy to them, to either the developers who are building the project or spinning up a chain, or even to the validators in the hub, by giving them a choice to validate or not, to halt with the chain or not, to me, that's just that's good news. Anytime you're giving more autonomy, more ability to make decisions for your own chain, I guess what I'm saying is sovereignty. The more sovereignty you're afforded, the better. So it seems like a pretty nice middle ground for both sides, but it'll be interesting to see where it goes. And then we also want to shout out the pitch competition. So for those who aren't aware, Archway, am I allowed to say that?
Yes.
Okay. And also we'd like to shout out the pitch competition, which is being hosted by Archway. It's coming up. It'll be a virtual pitch competition where teams will get the ability to essentially show off their potential dApps and use cases on Archway and potentially win some prizes. They'll be in the form of the Archway token. And yeah, I'm excited to see how that goes and see if there's any innovative ideas that come to fruition.
Yeah, and final day to submit your pitches is March 7th. So all that is required is the idea, a pitch deck, no coding involved. So go ahead and take a look at that. And then while we're at it, we'd also like to give a shout out to Robert Burkhart from Oregon Blockchain Group. He's recently published on Medium a guide from zero to hero on how to spin up a validator. And it's actually proved very helpful. It's a really great beginner's guide. So shout out to Robert for publishing that. We'll make sure to link it below. We love to see, that sort of support and help put out there in the cosmos.
Love seeing the community contribute in any way, and something like documentation on things that aren't as simple to explain are always helpful. So again, shout out to you and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And now looking outside the cosmos. So it's looking like Binance US might have to settle with the SEC. So Binance has been under investigation since 2018. And in the last 2 months, 2 trading firms have been subpoenaed to disclose their issues or their trading deals with Binance US. So the chief strategy officer, Patrick Hillman, told the Wall Street Journal recently that originally, as the exchange grew very quickly, they weren't aware of the initial laws and requirements to prevent money laundering, sanctions, evasions, and corruption. So they're working with the SEC now to solve that out.
Well, I mean, I guess I find that kind of hard to believe that they weren't aware of the anti-money laundering and KYC type laws, but if they can defend that, that's their prerogative. But I can definitely understand where they're coming from with how fast things grow. When you start up like a company like that and it gets traction similar to how FTX did, it can kind of grow faster than you anticipate to the point that you're no longer prepared or really staffed to be able to handle that type of growth. And that's where things start to seem to get off the rails, is once you lose that ability to have transparency into what's happening and really have enough people around to, hold people accountable and have these checks and balances. So I'm not going to go out here and say they just purposefully, didn't want to pay attention to these laws. But I will say I find it hard to believe that a company as well-versed as Binance was unaware of the anti-money laundering.
Yeah, agreed.
And then we also wanted to talk about the SEC, who issued a complaint to Do Kwon, Terra, and some of the potential co-conspirators in that case. This is something I think we've been waiting to see happen, and it looks like it's finally starting to get some momentum, where they put out a complaint and it kind of laid out some of the thoughts of the SEC on what they may consider security or derivatives of a security. And it really starts to give, I think, the entire space a little bit of clarity.
Prior to Terra's collapse, stablecoins were not viewed as securities, but since then, some might actually fall under the SEC's purview in that classification. And that's actually what got Paxos to stop issuing BUSD just last week, which we covered in last week's podcast. So it'll give us a little bit more clarity under what stablecoins are now considered securities under the SEC's purview.
And anytime we can get more visibility into how they think, the better, we can prepare as like a entire space. It again appears like they're going to be pretty harsh on their definition of what a security is. So I think it just creates a scenario where people in the space need to be very careful with what they're issuing and what they're entering into, to make sure that they're at least generally adhering to the laws as we understand them, to avoid this type of regulatory, scrutiny from the SEC. So again, it's always nice to get a better idea of what matters to them and what they're looking for. I just don't know if what I read in that complaint was something I would consider positive for the entire space.
Yeah, only time will tell. And then moving away from US regulations, it looks like the Security and Futures Commission in Hong Kong will let retail investors back into the crypto exchange game. So it looks like they're going to allow exchanges trade in Hong Kong, but only large cap tokens.
Okay. So there, I believe this is kind of how it's being done in the US to an extent. If you go onto like a Binance US or a Kraken, they're only really allowing you to trade very, few assets. You might see maybe 15 or 20 on a US version. Whereas if you go to their international version of the same exchange, you're going to see maybe hundreds of pairs, 200 pairs. I think it's like a good step. It's interesting timing. I know they banned it in Asia, not entirety of Asia, but I know some of the countries did during really almost the top of the bull market. And now it feels like we're closer to the bottom and they're now re-allowing entry. So timing is just, maybe it's just coincidence, but a little odd, but I'm happy to see that they're allowing it because at the end of the day, the citizens should have the ability to choose where they want to put their money and really their risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And last but not least, a warning to all of you looking to attend ETH Denver next week. So hackers are putting up sites pretending to be ETH Denver organizers, and they're actually draining MetaMask wallets. So they've paid ads on Google to have SEO rank them above the actual ETH Denver site. So make sure to be very careful when Googling ETH Denver or purchasing your tickets. Make sure that you're actually going to the correct and legitimate website.
Yep. And diligence is really important. I wouldn't even just limit it to when you're searching for websites. Like on site, be very careful. I have heard stories of people posting QR codes or different things to seem like you get a free prize or a free NFT, and they're actually fairly malicious. So just keep that in mind as you're operating if you're at these events anywhere, but especially with ETH Denver coming up, just be very aware of what you're doing and cautious that you don't end up falling into some sort of scam, because it is a lot of people spend a lot of time and effort coming up with these schemes, and they're tough to avoid if you're not paying attention.
Yeah, 100%. Just remember that the official ETH Denver site is ethdenver.com, nothing else. So make sure to be careful with that. And we'll see you guys actually next week. So next week we will not have an Archin podcast recorded because both of us will be at ETH Denver.
Yes, we will. And if you're going to be there, we'd love to have you guys stop by and say hi or just talk about anything you guys have been doing or that you're interested in. And if you want to, we can definitely talk about what we're doing here at Phi Labs.
Absolutely. Well, bye, everyone.
See ya.
Prior